I'm incredibly fortunate at Utah Valley University that I have one of the best biomechanics labs in terms of equipment and systems that I can use to analyze athletes. I'm also incredibly fortunate that I have a lot of athletics teams that are eager and excited to put biomechanics and exercise science principles to their athletes to make them better. Our goal when we analyze athletes is to do a couple of things. First and foremost is we want to prevent any injuries. Injuries can be a real issue to an athlete. And so we do this with all of our athletics teams. And we might do things like bringing them into a biomechanics lab or one of our physiology labs and testing everything we can about the way that person moves. One of the things that we really try and stay away from are things like an ACL tear. And one of the most common ways that ACLs are torn is via a non-contact ACL tear. And that basically means there isn't a person coming in and hitting your leg really hard to tear your ACL. It's actually just your own body trying to stop and accelerate and change directions, cut faster, jump higher. That can also cause ACL tears. Frankly, the only way to get rid of a contact ACL tear where someone hits you is to just don't ever get hit. And I always say just run a little faster. But these non-contact ACL tears, those are things that we can actually really dive into a lot of details into the way an athlete might land, kind of catch themselves, and then quickly try and change directions. Now, one of the applications and principles in biomechanics that feeds really closely into this is this idea of impulse. An impulse is just the product of a force applied over a period of time. The main product of an impulse is a change in momentum or a change in velocity of an object. Again, picture your favorite athlete. They come down from some movement and you know they need to explode out of that movement and get to the next defender, get to the next chance to be able to score. And because that's something that they have to do really, really quickly, meaning the time is very short, that means they need to have really high forces to counteract that short time. Well, the problem is if that athlete has muscles that aren't activated fast enough or strong enough, they'll go to make that land, go to make that change or direction of that cut, and all of a sudden, instead of the muscles withstanding a lot of those forces and torques, that force and torque can actually be passed on to the ligaments like an ACL joint. So we can look at landing mechanisms, right? What's the position of their knee when they land? How strong are their muscles? Can they withstand some of these rapid accelerations that are occurring at the knees and the hips? And after we look at that, we might inform some of their strength and conditioning coaches who do wonderful work with our athletes. And we might tell them, hey, we really need to focus on strengthening this leg at this specific time period and in these movements. In fact, one semester I had one of our volleyball players come into class and she was not happy with me. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I've got to do pause squats. She's like, I've got to go down into a squat, sit there for a second, and then explode up. And she said, it is the worst thing in the world. And they told me that I was doing it because of some of the data that you collected in your lab. And it was true. We found out that she just couldn't quite get down and up quite fast enough. So we really wanted to help her train some of those movements. Right? This is just one of those applications as we work with athletes in biomechanics. Now, what's really interesting about this is we always say in the Department of Exercise Science that the teams that work with us tend to do really, really well on campus. So we've worked with volleyball for a lot of years, really extensively, and they've been repeated WAC champions. And so we're proud to think that some of the work that we're doing has helped our athletes not get injured and even perform better. And that better performance is obviously a big part of what biomechanics does. Preventing injury is what we want to do in our athletes. But sometimes our athletes are just not quite fast enough. They're just not quite strong enough. And while we can have great programs in our strength and conditioning programs where they're doing a wonderful job training, biomechanics is the science that allows us to really dive into the details of how they move. Really dive into the details of how they utilize their muscles and understand the better ways that we can train these athletes. It goes beyond just something like how high can an athlete jump and can actually look at what are the forces that are going on while they're jumping. And is there one leg that's compensating for the other one? Or is there one leg that needs to be a little bit stronger? And as we bring athletes into our labs and test them on all of our equipment, we can generate these reports. We can generate data that can inform these decisions. Again, our goal with athletes is to make them bigger, faster, stronger. And I've always said, as you start looking at athletes these days, it seems like they're doing all of those things, right? They're not only getting bigger, but they're getting faster, right? They're moving in incredible ways at incredible shapes and sizes. And a lot of that is due to these principles of exercise science and physiology and biomechanics that are actually informing the decisions we make about these athletes to train them to do these tasks that almost seem out of this world in the way that they move, in the way that they jump, in the way that they sprint and change directions, right? And this is something that we do a lot in our biomechanics and exercise science labs at Utah Valley University as a way to help our athletes have a little bit more of an edge on the competition so they can win more games and bring more championships to our campus. I talked about how I have one of the best biomechanics labs for athletes. Check this next video to find out why that's even more the case when we talk about golfers.